So then, Germany. I think it's one of those countries that you often hear people talking about in the carp fishing fraternity, and they all go, that's got some mega fish. And Germany definitely has got some fantastic fish. If you're on Instagram and you see some of the carp that get posted by the German carp anglers, then you cannot but fail to go, wow. But as a country, it's actually been on the carp fishing map for many years now, and it's probably about 25 years ago when a giant common got caught from a lake which is now known as Mary and Joe Pool, and the common eventually went on to be the world record common, and that's a fish called Mary. I think at its top weight it weighed about 94 pounds, and this was before the fishing Rainbow Lake and the commercial lakes of France really started getting big. This was a properly natural carp which was in a 10-acre gravel pit, quite a deep gravel pit, quite a rich gravel pit as well, and quite a low stocked gravel pit, and it started to pack the weight on. Eventually, as I say, it topped out about 94 pounds. But as a lake, there was also some other really good fish in there, and the biggest mirror in there was called Joe, and that's where it got its name as Mary and Joe Pool. And when it comes to the carp fishing grapevine, everyone was like, wow, I'd love to get a ticket to fish there. Where is it? And I even know German anglers now that don't even know where it is. But it basically is, can we call it the Red Mere of German carp fishing, that venue? It's where the birthplace of modern day carp fishing started, really, in Germany. A little bit like Lac de Saint-Cassian in France, and as I say, Red Mere in England. And it's a really rich water, and I luckily enough know quite a few of the guys that live local to it. I've known him for quite a few years, and about 4 or 5 years ago, one of my really close mates in Germany, Christian Finkelde, long-time carp angler Christian, went on to catch Mary and Joe, both at really good weights, and he was actually the former world record holder for the common as well when he caught Mary on one occasion. He turned around to me just out of the blue and said, would you like to have a fish on the lake? And obviously, having seen pictures of Mary at massive weights during the course of its life, and really wanted to go and have a fish there, I was like, yeah, definitely, do you think you can do it for me? And a few months later, he said, you're in the club. And my ticket application came through, I filled it out, and a little bit different to what English carp fishing's like, where you're paying thousands of pounds for tickets. This particular membership cost me at the time about 60 quid. So I was like, wow, 60 quid to get in a lake like that. And it's got so many different members on there. It's like a who's who of German carp fishing, and over the years there's been people like Marcus Peltzer fish there, Andy Scherf, Christian Finkelde, Nermin Caro, Frank Schmidt. You know, whoever's got a big name for catching big carp in Germany, they've had a ticket for it, and it's been the birthplace, as I say, for modern day German carp fishing. So I knew when I was about to go there for my first trip, it wasn't going to be an easy task. I knew it was quite a difficult lake to fish, where I knew some people, I'm not going to name any names, but I knew some people that had done over 100 nights for one fish, which is pretty hard going on anywhere. And but I did know that there was a few guys on there that caught quite a few fish during the course of a year, so it wasn't going to be a massive task to get carp out of there, as long as I was on top of my game. And obviously I had a lot of local information, local knowledge from some of the guys that I knew was fishing there. But my first ever trip to the lake was in June 2019, and obviously I was really keen to get there, driving across Europe, and I'll never forget the trip because it was over 30 degrees every single day I was out there from the moment I left England to go to Germany, and my electric windows broke on the way there, and my aircon packed in as well, so I was trapped inside this like greenhouse going to the lake. And when I arrived there, it was so hot, I was so worn out, but it was fantastic conditions. There was low pressure front coming in, a lot of rain, and just that perfect big carp fishing time of the year when you know something's going to happen. And the first day I was there, I saw Christian Finkelde, and Christian was on some fish, and he said to me, I'm on some really good fish in this corner, Crowe, so it wouldn't surprise me if I get one. And lo and behold, the next day he caught himself a fish which is called fantail, or I forget the name, the actual pronunciation of this. It's called Schleiersvans, which is the German pronunciation for it. And from memory, it was about mid-50. So that was my first carp that I saw from the lake. And what an introduction to see a fish like that having been really keen to get to the water and just see my first carp. It was a real good one, so that really got the lighter of the spark burning. And I think it was either my second day or my second night when I actually caught my first carp from the lake, which was a really quick start. It was a 30-pound common, a fish that I actually said at the time that if I'd lost it, I'd have thought it was one of the really big ones in there, because it fought really hard. And at the time I was fishing there, Mary and Joe both gone. There was now a fish in there that was called a doctor fish, which was weighing about mid-80s. So, this particular lake, it has a habit of doing really big fish, like a lot of the historical carp waters around the world. When a big one disappears, there's always another one to replace it. But after that first trip that I went there, which turned into about a 10-day trip, I think I ended up with about 4 or 5 carp, I think it was, with the biggest just into 50 pounds, which is a really great fish to catch on my first trip there. So needless to say, I was really keen to get back over there, and the following year in 2020 I was back again, and this was the year when COVID started, and it was a little bit and ahhing about whether you could go over to Germany much, but I thought I'd risk it to go over there. And my first trip back there, the first day that I pulled into the car park, I got out of the lake, got out of the car, walked to the lake, and I saw a massive fish dead on the surface. And it turned out to be the doctor fish, which was the biggest carp in the lake, which was an 85-pound common. So not the kind of thing you want to see. But that particular year, I ended up doing 3 trips to the venue during COVID, and managed to catch myself that fish called Schleiersvans, can't never pronounce that name, that fantail fish, which was a 62-pounder when I caught it. So that was a fantastic way to finish that year. But I couldn't then go back for another year because of what happened with COVID. It stopped us travelling and stuff. But I was back again last year in November when I did a 10-day trip and caught myself just 1 fish, which was a 50-pounder. But that is the kind of fishing that's on offer in this lake. It's not somewhere you can just rock up to and catch fish. And whenever I go there, I'm just hoping that I'm going to get 1 bite. So this year, when June came round, I was booked to go again. And let me just tell you a little bit about what the lake stock is like now, because as I said, them really historical carp have passed, but there's still some really fantastic fish in there, including carp over 80 pounds. And the biggest fish in there is a fish that's known as Mr. P, which is anywhere from sort of mid-70s to mid-80s, really, depending on whether it's spawned or what time of year you catch it. And then after that, there's a fish in there which is called Black Spot, which is a big common. It's got a real habit of producing big commons, this lake has, and that fish can be anywhere from sort of low 70s up to low 80s. So there's still some really good target fish in there, including maybe a dozen or thereabouts fish over 30 kilos, which is 66 pounds. But they're backed up with quite a lot of 20-kilo fish. Don't know exactly the number of carp that's in the lake, but it's about 10 acres in size with depths down to about 40 foot in places. But if I said there was 50 carp in there, maybe a few more than that, it's probably on the side of the lower end of the scale, really. There's probably a few more than that, but I don't really know. You probably need to speak to someone like Nermin, who knows the lake like the back of his hand, but he's fished there for quite a few years. And during the years that I've been going to the lake, I've got to know Nermin really well, Nermin Caro, who's another one of these really mega successful German carp anglers who, wherever he goes to, he's got a habit of catching big fish. And he's caught Mary himself. I think he caught it 2 times before it passed away. He caught Joe as well. He even caught the doctor fish at 85 pounds as well. So he knows the lake like the back of his hand. But on this trip, I knew that the lake had been fishing really difficult. None of the real big ones had been out. Mr. P had not been out yet, and neither had any of the really big 30-kilo fish. So I timed it right, really, when I got there, because the conditions looked pretty good for the weather front that was coming in. It looked like there could be a bit of rain that was going to be towards the back end of the 2-week trip that I've got booked. And whenever I go there, as I say, I just want to get off the mark. And normally what happens is when I go there, it takes me 3 or 4 days to sort of get myself settled in. You get to know where the fish are, what they're doing, and who's catching, because it is a busy lake. It's a popular club lake because of the stock that's in there, and because of the kudos of the lake as well within Germany. You do get a lot of really good carp anglers fishing the lake. So the day that I arrived, I didn't arrive to a very quiet lake. I think it was one of these like long weekends that you've got in Germany. And It's like a bank holiday weekend that you get in England, and I think there was about 12 anglers on the lake. So I was struggling to get in an area that I really wanted to get into. So I had to wait 3 days before I could go to where I really fancied setting up and spending the rest of my trip. So those sort of 3 days that I was there, I was just kind of watching the clock tick by and seeing if anybody else could catch anything. And during the 3 days, I think there was one lad who caught one fish, a guy called Yannick. I think he caught a fish that was 24, 25 kilos, so nearly mid-50s. Nice fish, really old mirror as well, one that I'd definitely like to catch. And when all of the weekend had passed, it gave me a little bit of an option to swim from where I'd been, and it gave me the option to go into a swim that's known as First Point, and that's where I really like fishing. It's where I caught Schleichfans from. It's also a swim that does have a habit of producing some of the better fish that's in the lake. It's done Mr. P a few times, it's done black spot as well a few times. So I got myself set up in there, and it's a nice sort of area because it's got lots of depths in front of you, lots of options out in front of you. And the best way of describing the lake is that it's 10 acres in size, but it's really sort of split up into 2 sections. Well, probably 3 sections. You've got the old part of the lake, and then you've got the new part of the lake. And the new part of the lake is kind of split into a sort of a middle area, which we call the U, and then the new area of the lake, which is down the bottom end. But the old part of the lake is where it's known that the majority of the stockfish, the really old fish, are from the lake, because there's still quite a lot of carp in there from the days of Mary 30 years ago. Some really old carp, 30, 40, 50 years old in age, that have seen angling pressure throughout their lives, and that's where they tend to hang around in the depths of that lake, where it goes down to about 45, 50 foot, something like that. But there's lots of different options in most of the swims. It's quite weedy, it's very clear water, and it drops off quite suddenly as well. But some of the weed beds are absolutely huge. They're top to bottom in 20, 30 foot of water, really long, straggly weed that when the fish, when they get some momentum and get in there, you've got no chance of getting them out of there. So you are fishing with really brutal gear, quite tough gear. So I'd spooled up with 18-pound camo outline straight through, and then I got 3 rod lengths of Shoctite leader on there. That's 50-pound Shoctite leader. I've got 4-ounce leads on lead clips, and sometimes I was using 35-pound. I was chopping and changing basically my hook links and my rigs, depending on how I was feeling on the day. But I was chopping between 35-pound captive coated hook link and even using 50-pound Shoctite as well. So, pretty tough gear depending on where my rods were going to be. Now you can only use 2 rods on that lake, but what I've found from over the trips that I've done there is that you're better off roving your rods around, trying them in different spots, trying to find the depth where the fish are at. And it was quite warm when I got there. Those first 3 days had been forecast some rain, but as is always the case nowadays with these apps that you get, the rain was getting put back, and during the first sort of 10 days of my trip there was some really high pressure, lots of sunshine, really quite warm, and it was quite tough sitting there and blanking away in very, very sweaty, hot conditions, because I also had the dog with me as well, so I was having to look after her, having to walk her at the right times of the morning when it was nice and cool for her, having to keep her doused in water, trying to keep the temperature down on her. But I did actually manage my first carp of the trip, which I've just forgotten about, on day 4, which I'd kind of stalked from the margins around the beach area where I'd seen quite a few fish. Now the beach area does have a tendency to have quite a lot of smaller residents down there. Certainly during the summer months you can walk around the lake and see lots of 20-pounders, 30-pounders, the sort of younger fish in the lake, but not really see many of the bigger fish. But I'd seen this group of fish just off the edge of this bush, and I managed to get them feeding in the morning, and my first fish of the trip was a 38-pound mirror, which was a nice start to the trip, because as I say, all I want to do is whenever I go there is just get that first carp to make the trip worthwhile, because it is quite a journey for me. I live in Yorkshire, I've got 4 or 5 hours of driving in England, then I've got the tunnel crossing. So when I got that first fish at 38 pounds, I was proper buzzing. But the next few days was quite quiet. I'd stopped seeing fish quite close in, so it was more sort of targeting the deeper areas, and I knew that 1 or 2 of the local lads had been catching quite deep as well. A lad known as Stephen had been catching some really good fish early season, around 6 metres, 7 metres, which is about 25 foot, something like that. And I managed to get myself a nice 56-pound common, which has got a name, but I can't remember what it's called. I think it's Polymier or something like that. And I then followed that up with a couple of 20 kilo fish, a nice common that was a real classic looking fish, and also a nice mirror as well of 20 kilos, as well as a 25 kilo mirror, which is a 55 pounder. So for once I'd managed to get amongst some half decent fish, because my best trip prior to this was for 2.5 weeks during COVID, and I think I caught 4 carp during that trip, which was pretty good going. But most of my trips to the lake, it'd either been 1 or 2 or even 3 fish. But by now I'd started to knock up sort of half a dozen fish, which was pretty good going on this lake. And with that kind of momentum, I knew that there was a good chance of me getting an half decent one as well, because the big ones were really due out. And then in the early hours of, I think it was Friday morning, I managed to get a couple of bleeps on my 8 metre rod, which has been my most productive. I've been baiting up with 2 kilos of SLK or Secret 7, the mix of those 2 baits from DNA Baits. I know that both of those baits have done really well on the lake. And in the early hours, about 4 o'clock in the morning, I got a couple of bleeps. And I remember waking to it, and bearing in mind that most of the bites on this lake are quite aggressive, I was thinking it could be a bream or a tench, which are also in the lake. And I fell back to sleep. And then a few moments later, another couple of bleeps occurred. And I remember thinking then, maybe it's one of the better ones just trying to shake the rig. So I slowly got into my chest waders. Everything was done really casually, and by this time I'd had another bleep, and I'd looked at the rods and it didn't look like a carp bite. But I picked up the rod and struck into it, and I was met with this kind of initial little tap on the end, and my brain straight away went, that's a tench, it's not a carp. And then it took really aggressively for a real short period of time, just like a quick zzz on the clutch as it pulled very, very gently but quite aggressively at the same time. And then I thought, maybe that's just an aggressive tench. I turned my headlamp on because it was still dark, and then literally just reeled in probably, I don't know, 10 meters, not thinking there was much on the end of it. And then I saw a big ball of weed, and I could see at the back end of it something moving. So initially I thought it might have been a catfish because it looked quite long. And then as it got closer, I then saw this long flank and this giant common on the end. And it was so big, it could only be one fish, because there is only one really big common in the lake. And with this great big ball of weed over its face, it obviously, you know what it's like when you get a carp weeded up. When they get a load of weed over their eyes, they're a lot more gentler to handle. You can almost reel them in, and that's basically what happened. And it went off to the left for a little surge, and then I just pulled it back towards the net, and in it went first time. It was as simple as that. It was over and done with in a matter of no time whatsoever, probably less than a minute, which for a giant carp like that was really surprising, because it's got a reputation, this fish has, for really fighting hard. And I could see that it was going to be a fish that was close to, well, 80 pounds. It looked absolutely ginormous in my landing net. And it's fair to say that the landing net that I was using, it's not a very deep landing net. So with this massive long carp in the bottom of it, my brain was just going, that has got to be black spot. It's got to be the biggest common that's in this lake. And straight away I'd gone from being half asleep to a child at Christmas with a massive beam across my face, because I knew full well it could be very, very close to 80 pounds if it had not got involved in spawning. But you know, I wasn't bothered either way. It was the biggest common in the lake, and that lake in particular, it's got a reputation for producing really big commons. And ever since I first set eyes on the carp in that venue, and I read some of the features from some of my my German friends who'd written articles in English magazines about that lake, I'd always wanted to catch a really big common from there. So seeing this fish in the bottom of my landing net was just immense. It's my personal best carp is an 86 pounder, and I knew it wasn't that kind of weight, but something very close to that. So I pulled it in to the margin, staked it out so it was going to be nice and safe, and there was no chance of it getting out. And I just popped it into one of our weigh slings, one of our recovery slings, and then I popped it back into the landing net before I did anything with it. So there was just no way it was going to get out of the recovery sling, and there was no way it was going to get out of the landing net either. So it was nice and safe. And then when it was daylight, I weighed it, and it weighed in a massive 76 pounds, which was just colossal, because carp in Germany are obviously a lot bigger than they are in England. And Mary, at the height of its life at 94 pounds, was just a freak carp. There's not been that many fish over 80 pounds in Germany, so anything very close to 80 pounds is a huge carp. And obviously a carp of that sort of magnitude from a lake like Mary-in-Joe Pool, I knew straight away it was going to be one of those carp of my fishing career, because I've had a few special moments in my fishing career, but I've always wanted a really big one from this lake because of the kudos that it's got on the grapevine overseas, not just in Germany, not just in England, but throughout the continent. You know, it's one of those carp, Mary-in-Joe Pool is, and Mary was one of those carp that really does stop people in the tracks. And the doctor fish was like that, and it's fair to say that black spot's exactly the same. So yeah, straight away, once I'd weighed it in at 76 pounds, I was trying to phone to my mate Nermin, who is like a brother to me. Whenever I go over to Germany, he looks after me. He's not only a fantastic carp angler and a really good friend, he's part of the Avid team in Germany. He's also part of the DNA Baits German team as well. He actually runs the factory for DNA Baits over in Germany, BAF International Europe, which is his main full-time job. So you might have spoken to him on the phone if you've ordered any baits for the continent, and I'm sure you'll have seen him in videos on YouTube, and certainly in magazine articles with him holding some really big fish, because he's one of those guys that knows an awful lot about that particular lake and the carp waters in Germany. And it's fair to say that I wouldn't have caught that fish without the help of Nermin, because his insights into the lake, telling me what's been happening on the venue during the course of the build up to my trip, and also during my previous trips, it's been absolutely, well, it's hard to put it into words. Let's just say that, because local knowledge is always going to be of great value to anybody, especially when you're fishing a lake so far away from home. But he came straight down, was his usual happy self, and a good fortune was that we also had Matthias from Carp Team Avid on the lake at the same time as well, and he was down to do some filming, and he came across with his camera, and we basically just took some really fantastic video footage of that fish, and also some of the best photographs I think I've ever seen of a carp that I've caught myself. Because a lot of the time I'm fishing on my own, I do a lot of self takes, and you know, I look back at my own pictures, they're probably not as good as they could be if I had a cameraman next to me all the time. But on this occasion I definitely did, and Matthias is a brilliant cameraman, and he took some really breathtaking images of a very special carp. So it was one of those memories that will definitely live with me for a long time, to catch a carp like that from Germany, from such a difficult lake, really hardcore proper carp lake. It's not like a commercial venue. There's not many commercial venues at all in Germany, and that's probably one of the reasons why a lot of English carp anglers find it difficult to get hold of tickets or spaces or places to go and fish in Germany, because it's one of those areas where everything's kept really quiet. The local anglers are very protective of their own fishing. There are some day ticket lakes over there that you can go and fish, and but a lot of the club lakes with the really big carp in, the really special carp, they're kept nice and quiet. And as I say, I'm very, very privileged to have been invited by my old mate Christian Finkelder to join that club. There's some really good guys on there, and I'd like to thank them all for having me on the lake and sharing what was a very, very special memory for my angling career, but certainly for this year. Wow. Woohoo! What an awesome carp from an awesome lake. Absolutely made up. Oh, there you go. Black spot. That's 76 pounds. Beautiful carp. Proper made up with that. Can hardly hold it either. What a beautiful fish. Oh. Ready to go back. Well, this is what the Germans do when you catch a big one. Thanks to Steve, has given me. What is it, Steve?
Rotkäppchen.
Rotkäppchen. Right, okay. I can't even pronounce it, but let's hope it tastes good anyway.
It's for 30 kilo plus in Germany.
Is it? Wow. 30 kilo plus, mate. Right. I'm not going to waste it though. I'm not going to chuck it all over the place.
Hey! Hey!
Wow. Cheers, guys. Cheers, Steve. Thanks.